Great. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you are watching this event. My name is Daniel Perel, and I serve as a representative to the United Nations for the Baha'i International Community. I have the honor of moderating what I'm sure will be an inspiring and galvanizing conversation among a number of key actors to commemorate this United Nations International Day of Peace and the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. At this gathering, we're focusing on pathways for transformation at the United Nations. Before diving in, I would just like to extend my gratitude to the long list of co-sponsors for this event. They include UN 2020, the NGO Committee on Sustainable Development New York, the SDG Impact Awards Community, Cosmos Journal, Unity Earth, of course, the platform where this is being displayed for the first time, the Baha'i International Community, and then our participating panelists from the United Nations Office for the Commemoration of the 75th Anniversary of the UN, the NGO Committee on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the Parliament of the World's Religions for Peace, the African Union Youth Envoy, and Dialogue for Peace. So really it's a very diverse and broad-ranging crowd, and I'm really excited to learn from and with all of you. So we come together today in honor of the United Nations International Day of Peace, a day devoted to strengthening the ideals and culture of peace, to joining together in harmony, to working past our differences, and to drawing inspiration from the richness of our diversity. The theme for this year's International Day of Peace is Shaping Peace Together. Already millions of people across the globe are giving voice to this vision by participating in a global conversation on building a peaceful and prosperous future. To commemorate this day and recognizing that peace is a destination to which all of humanity is aspiring, I have the honor of speaking in this intergenerational and international conversation with a number of key actors who are, in a diversity of ways, trying to advance the cause of peace around the world. I'll first take the liberty of framing the conversation with a few opening reflections, and then I'll introduce our distinguished guests and allow them a brief word of welcome. So like the leaders who helped shape the United Nations, this generation is being confronted with a crisis that requires new solutions, integrity, and moral courage. Climate change, environmental degradation, risks associated with digitization, an increase in armaments, all of these challenges are profound in their own right. Yet I might suggest that they're actually symptoms of a deeper crisis, a crisis related to meaning, to identity, and ultimately to how we define success and progress. What is needed then is more than the technical fixes to our global governance system, necessary though they may be. It is a commitment and loyalty to leadership, imagination, and inclusive processes. It must involve diverse voices, indigenous populations, different generations, geographical diversity, economic, gender, and racial diversity. Only by increasing our understanding of each piece of the puzzle will we be able to finally see the image and realize the potential of a flourishing global community. Today, we're going to delve into the question of where political will comes from and how it can be generated, how we create environments that allow leaders to think beyond their constituency, devise creative solutions, and truly learn from one another, a process that can then serve to rebuild trust. We will also focus on different dimensions of the long sweep of history, touching on religion as a social force, among other motivating factors, the history of the UN itself representing the most recent evolution in global governance, the current moment, and possibilities for the future. With this as broad framing, I'd like to ask our panelists if briefly they could each share with the viewers and each other what it is that inspires you to work in this field, what excites you in humanity and keeps you motivated even when times are most difficult. I'll offer a quick one line of biography by way of introduction to each, but please note that there will be a more formal biographical note shared with those who are viewing this. And we'll go in alphabetical order by first name. So first we have Audrey Kitagawa, who is the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Parliament of the World's Religions and the president, founder of the International Academy for Transcultural Cooperation. So Audrey, what is it that inspires you?
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for that question. And I want to share how very privileged I feel to be with all of my friends and colleagues on this panel this morning. So how we spend our time and choose how we spend our time really is important because time represents units of our lives. So how we spend our time speaks to what we are giving our life to. because the entirety of our life force is being applied to whatever we are choosing to undertake. So what we choose to pursue in life and how we develop as persons, what we hold dear as our values, ultimately forms the lives that we lead and actions that we undertake. And peace within your own self, peace within the world, is a very important thing to have. It is a value that you always, for myself, let me speak for myself, that I always strive to attain. Of course, you know, the big picture, it is aspirational, but we can make a huge contribution if we undertake the development of our own lives. And so this is the aspect of responsibility that we have to work at every day within ourselves, even as we simultaneously undertake whatever work that we are doing in the world. So what inspires me to get up every morning and keep working this is the fact that, you know, we are within a community of humanity that really is filled with people who are very inspiring, loving, wonderful, and have really also committed their life's work to the development of peace and to helping to make this world a better place. And when you are in such inspiring company, you cannot but help to want to be, you know, and living up to the examples that they set. And so in whatever small way that we can do this, I feel very privileged to be able to do so. So Mother Teresa said, we cannot do great things in life, but we can do little things with great kindness. And so this is what I feel is very important. Every moment that we live presents the opportunity to set forth your actions, whether in thought, words, and speech, and conduct, to demonstrate your commitment to peace.
That was beautiful, Audrey. Thank you so much for sharing. We would now turn to Aya Chebi from the African Union Youth Envoy Office. Unfortunately, she had a small technical problem in that the power was cut to her part of the world. So we will turn straight away to Azakaram, who is the Secretary General of Religions for Peace and is the lead facilitator for the United Nations Strategic Learning Exchange on Religion, Development, and Diplomacy. Aza, if you could let us know, what is it that inspires you?
Thank you very much. And I just want to say very shortly, exactly what Audrey said. That would be my best possible answer, precisely word for word what Audrey said. And I would also respectfully say that I am a disciple of Audrey, actually, and of all of the folks on this particular conversation and call. I wanted to salute Fabrizio for his long-term sustainability and leadership in the UN system, and each and every one of you for the work that you do. I am inspired by you, really, quite frankly, I'm inspired by you. I wake up every day because I pray for an opportunity to be able to be of service to the goodness that is around us in moments of intense sense of injustice, desperation, sadness, trauma, but the intense joy of commitment and service that comes with, especially within communities of faith, but by no means limited to communities of faith. I think the idiom "birds of a feather flock together," and so it's not a coincidence that we are here on this call, gathered by you, Dan, and the great work that you do. Honestly, I'm inspired by people. I'm inspired by God's creation. I'm a strong believer that God created us diverse, because he's much smarter than all of us, quite frankly. And if he's created us so diverse, there must be a darn fine reason for it. And the reason has to be beyond our tensions and differences. And that's why the work that Stephen does is, I think, absolutely critical and deeply inspiring. It's very good to do good work when things are going fine. It's probably even more necessary to be able to do good work with one another in spite of the differences, the radical differences. I'm a believer in radical inclusion and in radical honesty. And I think that those are common values to almost every single faith tradition ever, including humanists. So yes, short, I'm inspired by you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aza, for that. We will now turn to Fabrizio Hochschild, who has been serving as Assistant Secretary General for Strategic Coordination in the Executive Office of the Secretary General, and was appointed by the Secretary General Guterres as his special advisor on the preparations for the commemoration of the United Nations 75th anniversary at the Undersecretary General level. I think his business card has to be more like a business poster at this point. So Fabrizio, what is it that keeps you inspired and energized?
No, I'm not sure this is the answer you're seeking, but what I'd like to say, I have to say at the outset, if I'm very candid, is that I'm not always inspired. I'm often discouraged. You know, there's much that is not going so well. The world is, many find, more polarized, more divided than any time since the Cold War. The COVID pandemic, the impact on health, physical health, mental health, jobs, social cohesion has been devastating. And the world has not come together in the way that one might have imagined faced with such a global catastrophe should have happened. The response has been lacked coherence, lacked solidarity in many cases, and the poorest and those left most behind have suffered disproportionately. And I've also often discouraged by my own, it's not only shortcomings in the world, I have plenty of shortcomings of my own that I struggle with and make very uneven progress on addressing. So how do I still get out of bed? I mean, I feel tremendously privileged. I work at the United Nations. The United Nations is a strange throwing together of people, not only from all sorts of different parts of the world, but people with totally different backgrounds, totally different skill sets, and yet bound by a common vision and a common mission. And I've worked with so many different teams. I have 2 new teams now, where I barely knew anybody on the team a year ago. And each time I'm inspired by these colleagues who come together from all over the world, but united by a common set of ideals, and it's contagious. And so looking forward to seeing my colleagues each day, and especially younger colleagues, and learning from them, I find very inspiring. And then during the course of my career, you know, and this is a bit what Aza said, you know, often in the worst places, in the places where human rights are being violated on a horrific scale, where there's conflict, where there's displacement, where there's homelessness, amidst that, you will often see the greatest acts of human heroism. You will see in the people who are most affected, you know, man's and women's divine nature. It often comes through in such extreme situations with much greater clarity than in the normal everyday humdrum. And it feels very privileged to be part of that. And it feels very privileged to be in a job where you're not just witness to some of that, but you're in a position to help. It's your job to help. You're actually paid to help. You know, sometimes it feels that we should be paying to do our jobs and not the other way around. Now, at headquarters, we fight with a bureaucracy that can be very demotivating. So you have to recall those moments to stay inspired. But those are the things that inspire me, the heroism of many of those whom we serve, and the privilege I have of working with some extraordinary colleagues who are gathered from all over the place and bring huge diversity, but to a common vision.
Thank you so much. That was really quite lovely. Without delay, we will turn to Roberto Mucaro Borrero, who is a chief of the Indigenous Guyanea Taino community and has been actively engaged with the United Nations for over 20 years, advocating for the concerns of Indigenous peoples around the world. Roberto, what keeps you keeping on, as they say?
Well, first of all, I'd like to just say, thank you to my sisters and brothers for those really important words, those powerful words that were just shared before me. I feel very similar to all the speakers in my feelings of discouragement, as mentioned by Fabrizio. Seeing some of the things that are going on, some of the things that we thought we would not be experiencing in these times, but also inspired by the humanity of many peoples. And I think from an Indigenous people's perspective, we have a kind of a unique view on this, considering the historical trajectory of the impact of globalization, colonization on our peoples and on our worldview. And I know as a Taino person, as a person who was, I guess, asked to take on a leadership role within the community, is where you mentioned that title from Guayania community. I have to think back at what's occurred in a historical context for our people, and how the resilience in the face of just horrors over a long period of time now, and in this hemisphere, at least over 500 years, right, almost 528 years of various forms of oppression, and some more brutal than others, and some more subtle than others, but it's an oppression no less. But the inspiration comes to see the youth coming out and standing up and speaking out for things that they know are important, that are reflections of teachings of elders that some of us have looked up to, or voices from the past that some of us have looked up to or looked to for that inspiration in dark times, so to speak, for that light. And I think that the acts of heroism that were mentioned in some of the previous comments are truly inspiring. And at the same time, while we're facing the reality of what Fabrizio mentioned, where the world hasn't come together in the way that we would have liked to see, right, or we would have thought would have been the case. So yes, human rights defenders who continue to stand up to insurmountable odds every day, fearing for their own lives, their families, but still coming out to speak about oppression and impacts on themselves, their communities, their peoples. Those are truly inspiring. Youth coming out and stepping up, as I mentioned again. More recently, we saw what happened at Standing Rock a few years ago, where Indigenous youth and leaders, and there was an intergenerational exchange, and spiritual leaders from Indigenous communities came out, and there was a kind of galvanizing of these forces that, for this moment that was, really speaking about, at essence, the sacredness of the world around us, and the need to protect and remind people that there has to be a renewal of that relationship with the sacredness of the earth and all of its creatures, right? All of the peoples, in quotes, per se. So yeah, that inspires me. And then finally, I don't know, about others, but I also have children, right? And I want to be able to look them in the eye and say, yeah, I tried. I really tried, and hopefully that they will try too, based on that. And that's, what I saw from elders in my community, and hopefully I could be that type of, at least a light for others to continue in the struggles. Is we're gonna need that. It's all hands on deck these days, and so that's where I'll end, and just thank you for for allowing me, for providing this opportunity to share with all the rest of these amazing folks here.
Thank you so much, Roberto. And finally, we will turn to Stephen Aiello, who's the founder of Debate for Peace, which brings together Arab and Jewish students ages 13 to 19 from all over Israel and Palestinian territories to debate, negotiate, and attempt to resolve the most pressing global conflicts and challenges. And Stephen, I'm sure you see inspiring things every day, but I'll turn the floor to you and let you articulate it in your own words.
Thank you so much. And I love the premise of the question because Israeli-Palestinian dialogue and peace efforts, it's never boring, but it can be frustrating. And I encounter a lot of hatred and a lot of racism and kind of the less positive side of humanity. But I agree with everything that's been said before. It's absolutely the incredible, inspiring people that I've had the opportunity to meet. I grew up in a middle-class Jewish Italian-American family, really loving, supportive family in Brooklyn. And then I moved to the Middle East about 12 years ago, and I've gotten to travel around a bit and mostly live here. And I've just met the most incredible people, from religious freedom activists in Cairo to Bedouin women who are really fighting for the right to a basic education. LGBTQ youth whose families don't accept them for who they are. My adopted Palestinian family, who I stay by them for Shabbat, and they turn the radio off because they're worried it might offend me. My friends in Gaza, who I can't name them. I can't name them to protect their identity, but they just took courageous steps because they wanted to learn about Jews. And especially, I'm an educator, so I'm most inspired by my students. And I just wanted to show, this is Rotem. I'm going to show you here on the screen. This is last year. This boy is in 5th grade, and he's receiving an award from a parliamentarian in Israel. And Rotem started when he was in 4th grade. He started studying Model UN with me. And he is absolutely dedicated to bringing peace to the Israeli-Palestinian context. And as a 5th grader, he gave a lecture to his peers, to his classmates, on the history of peace efforts. So those are the people who inspire me, and give me the effort really to keep going when it feels like it's very frustrating and you're getting nowhere. And we have a teaching in Judaism, which I'm sure is echoed in almost every other faith, which is that when there's a lack of leadership, then it falls on you to do something. When there's a need for someone to take action, then you must take action. And unfortunately, that's what I see around me, is that I see there is a need. And so I say, when someone's doing what I'm doing, which is bringing Jewish, Israeli, and Palestinian kids to sit and talk about the things that we don't necessarily agree about, when someone does that effectively and there's no need for it, I'll be happy to move on to something else. But as long as there's a need for it to happen, then don't look to someone else to do it. Just get up and do it.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Those are, I think, often we say we want youth to be there just to get this representation, but I think that there's so much that can be contributed by all populations, from 4th and 5th grade all the way up to the most senior among us. And I think it's very nice to hear about these experiences you're having. So we'll turn now to the conversation of the day, which is about this intersection of peace and the United Nations. But before doing so, I just do want to acknowledge that this conversation would not have happened without the support and encouragement from Joni Carley, Jeff Huffines, and Margot Lazaro. So while it is sort of my face that you're seeing here, it's only on the shoulders of them that I was able to even have this conversation. So just an extension of gratitude to them for their dedication. So with that, we're going to go through kind of 4 stages of human time together. So the first is kind of this long history, centuries to millennia. The second is the recent history, the efforts at global governance. And there's the present moment, and then finally looking forward to tomorrow. So starting with this long history and thinking about humanity's grand narratives, a question of central importance is what allows and even encourages humanity to move from a collection of small tribes and clans to found city-states, nations, and then today, truly global institutions. Each of these allow collaboration at wider scales of action and impact. Technological advances in areas like communications and travel and food production, these all play key roles. But there are also numerous social forces, maybe for good and even for greed, that also played a role, whether it was the pursuit of political power, conquest, the spread of religion, or perceived superior ideologies. There was much that has motivated humanity. At the level of the individual, we just heard a number of excellent examples. And when thinking about factors that influence behavior and choices, we see that throughout history, religion or belief or these grand narratives have been a source of tremendous motivation, meaning, and thought. They've influenced the very ethical norms we hold today. And these are a vital expression of civilization that have laid important foundations for generosity and collective action, developing this shared ethic. And many of the objectives, especially those humanitarian in nature, have been executed by faith communities for thousands of years. So in this sense, we have to be careful not to discard both the wheat and the chaff. We know that concern for political or material advancements alone, whether for individual profits, GDP growth, or any other, without these ethical and moral bearings, they all too easily lead to greater misery, and they fail to speak to these true aspirations, which actually were just articulated by each of you and of all human beings. So with this as kind of the framing for what leads us to action over the long-term history, I would love to know from you, what are some of the merits and challenges you've seen in spiritual or faith-based action, and how can moral or spiritual questions be explored in ways that are perhaps as mature and sophisticated as these more technical issues? And other thoughts that may arise in your own mind as you think about sort of the grand historical sweep of humanity. So if anybody would like to take a first attempt at answering that question, the floor is essentially open. There's no such thing as a right answer, nor a wrong one.
Okay, I'm going to follow Stephen's commandment, but when nobody's speaking, you have to speak, just to encourage a little bit. So this may sound extraordinarily simplistic, and if so, please bear with me. I never promised grand narratives, but as a believer, I feel that the time when the intensity of the spiritual sense is heightened is when we actually come together with communities that are completely diverse, believe in completely different things, but are coming together for a common purpose, sentiment, even when they do not believe in God or in whatever, but they're believers. They're believers in the divine, in the creation. And I think that those are the moments when something very beautiful happens to the spirit and the soul. And you can see them in so many different contexts and situations. So I think that we, in a way, if we had not had the religion, we probably would have created it by now. I also say the same about the UN, by the way, just lest you think that I'm waxing lyrical. But there is a sense in which so much of what we hold on to today as bureaucrats, as professionals in development, international affairs, humanitarian work, so much of what we believe in terms of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I'm a big believer in that, is predicated actually upon the common moral and values of all faith traditions. So we wouldn't have arrived to the UDHR, to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, if we had not had this intense body developed over centuries that encapsulates the values inherent to all spiritual and faith traditions. And I think that if we keep that in mind, if we keep that source of what we see today as the codification of values of all, I think keeping in mind where this came from is a very important part of the answer to your question. Is we tend to look at our reality as though it's a segmented silos. You know, there was the Second World War, and then there was the post-war, and then, you know, colonialism, blah, 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 blah. Everything seems to be so beautifully categorized and siloed. And we forget that our lives bleed into one another, literally sometimes, but we forget that history is repetitive because we're bleeding into one another unconsciously, where time is actually flowing without us being able to say, wait a minute, there's a connection here. There's a connection between what the Palestinians and Israelis are going through today and what happened in the colonial era and the in-between world wars and et cetera, et cetera. We don't see that historical link. And we then, go back to certain either governments or civil society actors or whatever, and we sort of tell them, well, it's time for you to get your stuff in order because, colonialism happened a long time ago, so get on with it, But no. There's a memory that stays in our spirit that we remember the trauma of things we did not even physically live through, because it's the bleeding of history, one into the other. And I think that kind of, in a way, spiritual vision about how that what we're living today in terms of Black Lives Matter has everything to do with the history of the nation state as it emerged in different parts of the world, not just in this country, that it has everything to do with the slavery that happened centuries ago. And guess what? With the annihilation of the native population before that. There is a continuity of trauma and pain and re-infliction of that pain. We cannot afford to look at it the way that we seem to be doing it today, which is nicely siloed and categorized and analyzed. And this is political science, and this is psychology, and this is history. Actually, it's human reality. And there needs to be a spiritual depth that requires us to see the continuity of human action and the terror we inflict on our nature today that is part of the terror and the trauma of inflicting exclusivism and marginalization and just raw pain on one another, different one another's, generation after generation after generation. We need a spiritual depth to understand our historical continuity. And unless and until we can begin to see that as I sit here today as an Egyptian Muslim in the United States of America, I carry within me the wounds of so many and the responsibility towards so many. Not just every Muslim, every American, every Egyptian. No, I carry a responsibility towards the land I am walking on, the blade of grass that I happen to not even notice when I'm walking. I carry that responsibility. And I think that kind of spiritual depth about our historical continuity gives us a little bit more of that sense of responsibility towards one another. It doesn't matter what our religion is. It doesn't matter what our national context is. It doesn't matter what our ethnicity is. What matters is that we are intimately connected with one another, and what hurts one hurts all. And if we can take responsibility for that, then I think we become different human beings. And that is part of the spiritual depth that we don't seem to arrive at because we're so busy identifying the boundaries between one another. The United Nations, civil society, NGOs, academia. Well, that's grand. Our boundaries are grand. But what we hold as responsibility to one another, I think is a bit grander, to be honest. And there's no such thing as being able to do good without taking responsibility for what we don't do good, for the pain that, yes, even we inflict on one another.
Thank you, Aza. Are there other thoughts? I see Fabrizio, please.
I think Aza's words were very wise. I must say I find it difficult to sort of look at the arc of history in its totality. I do think, and of course I'm speaking from where I sit, if you look at the course of history, for most of history, there was a trend towards securing the peace and development of communities, in essence, through either agreements with the powerful or by trying to grow power and increase that power and use that power, often in hostile means, to increase prosperity. And so empires grew and empires were destroyed. Countries got into alliances broke, invasions happened. I think born of the terrible destruction that the weaponry of the modern age allowed for, first with the First World War and then with the Second World War, there was a fairly unique moment in history that had not happened until then, where there was this notion that perhaps the best path to peace and prosperity was not so much through alliance with the powerful, was not so much through hostilely gaining more resources, bigger armies, but through international agreement, through the development of international norms and law on a truly, and for the first time ever, global scale. The first attempt with that was with the Versailles Peace Conference after the First World War that led to the United Nations, to the League of Nations, which did not work out. And then there was another attempt with the United Nations after the Second World War. And in both cases, that wisdom came out of the most tremendous suffering. And I've heard it said, and it always worries me, the thought that maybe humanity needs to go through those moments of terrible suffering and self-destruction to emerge wiser, that somehow the wisdom is intertwined with the stupidity and one is born of the other. I do think now we're in a moment where there's an urgent need to reinvigorate our international endeavor, an urgent need to once again infuse with meaning the international cooperation. I think we've lost sight or certainly lost touch with some of the inspiration that, for all their political divisions, the generation who lived through 2 world wars felt in the 40s and 50s to create the United Nations. And I'm personally hoping, and I know many are too, that the silver lining on the dark cloud of COVID will be that we use this to try and recommit to global solidarity, not as a question of altruism, but as a question of enlightened self-interest in an interconnected, interdependent world to serve future generations better. I also think, when I look back at the founding of the United Nations, that there was this profound commitment with future generations. The founders of the United Nations, who were no doubt as imperfect human beings as we are, thought very much in terms of what they were going to leave behind for the next generations. That idea of future generations, and the rhetoric is all over the Charter and was all over the San Francisco conference where the Charter was signed. That rhetoric of a commitment to future generations, I feel today is very thin, if not absent. And it's very much around our interests of today. And a worry for me is that we will go down in history as the sort of me now generation, the generation that looked above all to its short-term welfare and lost sight of future generations. And I think we also need to try and reconnect, and the destruction we're doing to our environment, which nobody can pretend now not to be aware of, where it's apparent that the world we're going to leave behind is in a much unhealthier state than the world we inherited, I think is a reminder of that. But I hope out of COVID, we'll find that commitment again.
So Dan, hi, this is Audrey.
Yes, we'll take
I think this long arc of history that you are painting really is speaking to all of the converging forces, the confluence of the evolutionary flow of human consciousness that really is ever expanding into infinity and into the growing, increasing complexities of life. And we are creative beings that are always creating and pushing the frontiers of exploration, whether in space, over the oceans, in new technologies. So we are doing what is in our DNA to do. And we are perpetual pioneers that seek to push beyond the boundaries of perceived limitation and want to experience the inherent nature and freedom of our spirit that is beyond limitations and the boundaries of our bodies and the limitations of our minds. So the limited human mind cannot possibly know the infinite mind of God. And there is a mystery to the divine that we are always seeking to understand. And you asked about ethics. And I think ethics are very important because ethics are the ground of sacred being out of which our religious sacred texts arise and speaks to the values that we should adhere to as we continue to face the ever-growing complexities and push beyond the limitations that we are inherently bound by, whether of our bodies or whether of our minds, whether of boundaries. And so I want to share a specific initiative of the Parliament of the World's Religions, and it's a global ethic. So the Parliament's global ethic is its signature document. And I want to share the declarations, which very quickly says that we are interdependent, that we must take individual responsibility for all that we do. And this word responsibility, which Aza has so beautifully expressed, is a very important and integral part of what we must undertake in our daily lives and in all that we do. And we must treat others as we wish others to treat us. And therein is the important principle of the Golden Rule. And we should consider humankind as our family. And we must strive for a just social and economic order in which everyone has an equal chance to reach full potential as a human being. And then much of what we do is to be able to reach and realize the fullness and beauty of our potential. And that the earth cannot be changed for the better unless the consciousness of the individuals are changed first. And we believe, we really should pledge to increase our awareness by disciplining our minds through meditation, prayer, positive thinking, or ways that speak to our goodwill and our fervent undertaking of developing ourselves. For we are truly spiritual beings, and we should develop a spiritual discipline that will help us to realize the fullness and beauty of our potential. And the Parliament's global ethic has 5 directives, which I want to also share very quickly with you. And these 5 directives are: 1, a commitment to a culture of nonviolence and respect for life. 2, a commitment to a culture of solidarity and a just economic order. 3, a commitment to a culture of tolerance and a life of truthfulness. So Mahatma Gandhi indicated is part of his, mission in transformation of the society in which he was living, this important concept of truthfulness, satyagraha. And 4, the commitment to a culture of equal rights and partnership between men and women. And this is the, essential aspect of the equality that we seek to have between the gender. And 5, commitment to a culture of sustainability and care for the earth. So this all speaks to the return and the remembrance to our fundamental values and principles for living. And if we adhere to our values, it becomes the context within which we can gauge how we are being and moving in the world. And it is very important at all times that we do develop ourselves as spiritual beings, moving in a community of sacred life. For all around us is the teeming life force. And it is sacred, and we must really honor it. And so as we move through life and walk upon sacred Mother Earth, may we do so with great humility.
Thank you so much, Audrey. I think that interaction between the profound and the practical is really a helpful guide to help us as we engage with this world of turmoil. I know Stephen Aiello would also like to contribute to this, and if you would like to speak It's actually very helpful if you use the hand up function on the Zoom screen as Audrey did so well. So I will turn now to Stephen. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I think actually religion is a bit risky, kind of as a motivating force. Firstly, historically, religion has not dealt well with criticism. And I think critical thinking and the ability to give and receive criticism is very important for advancement individually and collectively. And so that's something I would be very concerned about. Religion has, of course, been used to be divisive between groups and within the group, between different parts of the group. In my faith, I can say still today we have, or at least for some of us, we have a prayer three times a day. We have in our prayers, we call it a blessing, but it's essentially a curse on those who think differently than us within the religion. So I think this is a risk in religion as a motivating force, and perhaps what most worries me is the leadership dearth that I see in my religion, but I think in many religions, which is people who speak for God, for the religion, but really have their own ulterior motive, whatever it may be. And I think the risk when you come and say that you're doing something in the name of God, the ability to mobilize people to go out and do it, instead of them reading the fine print and asking the questions, those are risk factors for me. Having said that, I myself and religions.
So Stephen,
And so when I pray,
it seems
I
as if
pray
you've broken up just a little bit. If you could go back to that for me part, I think that's where.
Yes. Sorry. For me personally, religion is absolutely a motivating force. I hope for good. I pray every day for the strength to go out and make a positive difference in the world. I read religious texts, Jewish and Muslim, every day. And highlight the passages that give me inspiration that I can take positive messages for, and I intentionally walk around being identified as a religious person because I know it forces me to elevate my behavior when people have a certain expectation and standard. So I think it can be a force for good, but I do think it's really important to separate that. To take religion from the clergy and the leadership and bring it to the lay people. And it's on us to go out and embrace our texts, our traditions, and learn about where things come from. I'm not optimistic that it's happening. I see with my students who, again, I find very inspiring, but I find that they tend to be uninterested in religion because they don't see it as reflecting their moral values, organized religion. So that's a frustration, and I think that's again, I think that's on us, those of us who identify as religious, to make a difference about that. I hope it will happen, but I'm not necessarily optimistic.
Great, thank you so much for that, Stephen. Sure, Roberto, go right ahead.
Thank you for giving me this space. Just listening to some of the other speakers and hearing, some of these more general observations, I think, my perspective comes from, a real, I guess, a micro view in this as a Taino person. And why I feel that's important in this context is because, for those who don't know who Indigenous Taino people are, we are Indigenous peoples whose traditional homelands extended from the greater Antillean Islands in the Caribbean all the way to the southern tip of Florida in what's now the US. And we were the first peoples who Columbus encountered in 1492, the first to be called Indians, and also the first to suffer a brutal oppression, genocide, and colonialism in this hemisphere. Many of these practices were exported to other indigenous peoples throughout the continent and then around the world. And not to say that these things didn't exist beforehand, but I think 1492 is a real pivotal point in human history. because we're linking both sides of the world in a way. There's an exchange. There's what was going on in an emerging Europe at that time, and the resources from this side of the world, human and natural, how they impacted, and things on the other side of the world. So it's a real interesting look about exchange, human confrontation. And we see that, as people mentioned, things play out again and again over time. But I think that there was a real missed opportunity at that time period when we talk about spirituality and about the way people look at the world and their relationship with the world. And for the first thing, those who were coming over had a different spiritual sense, a religious sense. And I think that our focus was not really more religion or dogma. It was more of our ceremonial interactions with the world around us that really made us appreciate everything. And, for us, we grew up in my ancestors, they had a land that had a year-round growing system, that we have a year-round temperature of about 80 degrees. We had the bounty of the sea. So it made them see in a certain way. It made them interact in a certain way. And when you spoke about how small clans and small tribes, eventually moved in your long vision of history, just a reminder, there are still small tribes and small clans, and they want to stay that way. There's a reason why they don't want to integrate into some of what is going on, at least in that civic sense, if for lack of a better word, because they see what happens and they see the breakdown, and they see that cutting off of their spiritual being, of what we're talking about, that spiritual essence, in relationship to the world around them. So there are people today who choose to remain indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation, right? And I think that that's really important when you look at urban centers like New York, where the United Nations is headquartered, and then you think about those folks, for example, in Brazil and in Peru and other areas who voluntarily isolate themselves. And I relate that back to my own communities. We had messages that were just not heard at that time, and that I think that are very relevant today. If we look at how the world and some of the reasons why we've gotten into this mess, right? We talked about power structures and we talked about other things, but at a real basic level, we're really talking about how we set our minds to walk in a way that allows us to manifest need and not greed, right? And our people tried to share that message, and it was really trounced because that Caribbean islands was the ground zero for not only the colonization of the hemisphere, but also the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, right, which Columbus started, by the way. And why I say it's important to talk about Columbus in that time is because Columbus also had a religious mandate, right, that sought to and looked at our people as not human. And when Asa spoke and touched upon those links, we certainly see the links between colonization, slavery, racism, to climate change, right? To what's happening now, to what happened to our people. So I think as the United Nations is coming to grips with that, and in the talks and in some of the rhetorics, we say future generations. This is certainly known amongst indigenous peoples who, our people knew, for example, you couldn't take all the turtle eggs, because if you took all the turtle eggs you wanted to gather, the future generations there would be no turtles for anybody else. That's years of observation, that's years, but again, that's emphasizing that understanding and responsibility. So in our languages, our indigenous language, our Taino language, for example, we don't really have a word for rights, but we have a word for responsibilities, and that's how we frame the rights subject. And that right action that's instilled from the very beginning about do no harm or to the community and to the relationships that you build from village to village, from island to island, from islands to mainland. That was all part of that diplomatic process that our people already understood. Diplomacy wasn't something that was granted to us from being involved after the Renaissance. We already had our own forms of diplomacy, of arts, of governance, and that we felt were very positive. We had a relationship with the divine that when it manifests into reality begins with the feminine. And we were, you know, that was a juxtaposition with this mindset that came with, where, you know, and not to offend, but where that says, you know, God is the Father, right? And we were saying, but, you know, our
presentations and open space and just this incredible massage of co-creation, this practice and muscle. And, you know, it feels like it was not long ago that I was in the opening ceremony with Becky and John and Hereditary Chief Elaine opening up. And here we are in now the beginning of the Peace Weekend. And so it's moving in the body to me is such a gift and an opportunity to integrate.
In many cases, we know what to do. So we know certain steps we need to do, and we're just not willing to sign the treaties we need, or we sign the treaties not intending to keep them. So it's a lack of will. And I heard a great quote from this former Slovakian foreign minister, Miroslav Lajčák. I hope I pronounced his name right. But the quote, "Perfect is the enemy of good," in the sense that it's basic diplomacy, but we need to be able to step back sometime and make, you know, the compromises needed to reach an agreement that's better for the world. We all want someone else to solve the problem instead of doing it ourselves. In Model UN, we see it. In Model UN, the kids sit down and they reach compromises to solve the issues. Are they out of country policy sometimes? Yes. But they're also very optimistic, very invested in the future, and they're creative, and they don't give up until they reach a resolution that has teeth, that has meaning. So I think it's totally possible. What I think needs to happen, my dream world is a UN that's not just government representatives, essentially, but includes all the power of business and entrepreneurship, humanitarians, and the knowledge of scientists all working together for the betterment of us. Realistically, I think we need to be more inclusive. So I'm gonna, you know, representing my students, I'm definitely gonna call for more youth. I put this question to my students, and one thing they said was, youth representatives at the UN shouldn't be your age, because I'm old for them. They said, we want real youth. And so they think teenagers should be there participating in the UN. They said, we care about the world. We're aware of these issues. We should have a voice. Some kind of collective youth world movement that has observer status at the UN. I think NGOs, civil society should be even more involved in the UN, even more present. I polled my students they live and breathe UN and Model UN. And I asked them, who do you rely on? That was the wording is, who do you rely on to solve the world's problems? And these students who run MUN simulations, 2/3 of them said NGOs and grassroots organizations, and 1/3 said the UN or government leaders. So that's kind of where their thinking's at. So I think we need to even more strengthen the NGO UN partnership, and find a way also to reconnect back from the UN to the people, in the sense that the UN does so much, and there are so many annual reports, and there's so much information, and people can't really read it all. People don't know what it means. So we know what the SDGs are. We know that there are problems. But I think it's just too much information coming at people. So some way to make an annual report that's really readable, to tell people this is the direction we're going in. You know, we're getting better with literacy. We're getting better with global education. We're not doing as well with climate change, you know, that kind of thing. To strengthen the connection between the humanity, the government, and the international organization.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. I like this idea of kind of an annual film that the UN can send to the world on the status of humanity. I see Aza has her hand up, and there's a direct question I want to put to her and to all of you, actually. Stephen rightly mentioned this idea of political will, or will. There isn't the will to achieve this. And one question that I've been struggling with, and I would love your insights into, is where does that will come from? How do we allow it to flourish and really energize the global community to utilize that political will, to reach within themselves and take those steps? And I'll just plug a paper that Fabrizio Hochschild wrote on integrity and moral courage. And I think that that's actually a really helpful resource to look at for the answer, but I would love to hear some others. So I see Aza and then Audrey had their hands up. So go ahead, Aza.
I was very inspired by what Stephen said, and it occurs to me that we can't expect the United Nations to do everything and be everything for everyone. I think the UN has its incredibly valuable role of bringing together the governments of the world. And where we see a failure or a lack of perfection or a lack of delivery on the part of the UN, it isn't because the institution itself has a problem. It's also really, quite frankly, because the governments themselves are suffering. They're suffering legitimacy, they're suffering delivery, they're suffering credibility. All institutions, as we know them today, are actually suffering. We are talking about long before we had the COVID, we were already addressing a crisis of institutional credibility, legitimacy, and capacities all over the world. So what the UN is it's the space where 193 governments come together. So what happens when each of these governments itself is failing in some way, shape, or form to deliver on its own mandate and credibility? Well, then obviously the being that brings them all together will also reflect those failures of credibility. And you're absolutely right. The Security Council meets about the same thing several times and doesn't get us very far, does it? Because the governments themselves are not in that space of perfection, shall we say. I'm being very diplomatic. I think that there's also, we have to appreciate that the UN is already including and doing plenty with the private sector, with NGOs, with climate and humanitarian action, with youth. Every single thing you mentioned, Stephen, is already being done, and plenty, by the behemoth that has become the United Nations system. And I think the issue here is, do we want the UN to be everything to everyone? Or do we want to be able to strengthen the institutions that represent the United Nations, which is the governments that we have, where actually we still have some say, some of us more than others, still have some say in the governance of our governments. And some of us in some parts of the world don't even think that that matters anymore because, you know, whose vote counts, let's not participate. When you have another part of the world which is begging to have the opportunity to vote and make an impact. So let's look at our own governance structures, let's look at our own institutions, let's look at our own imperfections of every single institution, whether it's a political party, Stephen, or whether it happens to be the government, or whether it happens to be even the unions. That so many of us in some other era, of course, not us, but some people really believed in for a long time. Trade unions, labor unions, teachers unions, all those spaces of public activism and engagement that are suffering plenty. Which brings me to the question. There is the very first word supposedly that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ heard, according to the learning that we have as Muslims, is he was an illiterate man, and yet he was told by the angel Gabriel, the story goes, read, Iqra. Now, how does an illiterate man read, right? The issue is that to read, if I was to read this word Baha'i International Community on my screen, I need to listen to each letter, put them together, and I am reading. The capacity to listen is sorely missing from so many of our institutional cadres and from so many of the leaders in today's world. The capacity to listen to the letters, to the sentiments, to the emotions. We're very busy with this and this and this and this and a million other ways. Are we really listening? Are we genuinely listening to one another? No, we're not. Many of us do not listen. And I think that capacity, which seems so simple and yet is radically amazing, it is transformative to the extent we don't have. We lack it. Who in the United Nations listens to who? At what point in time? Which government leader, political party leader, trade union leader, student leader listens? How do we listen to one another? We have lost the skill and the sense of obligation towards listening to one another. Look what happens when we do. What is Dan and all these amazing people here, Margot and Jeff, what are they actually doing? They're bringing us together so that we can listen to one another. And look how transformatively beautiful it is. Look at the sense, feel the sense of this moment of grace, because we're listening to one another. Unfortunately, the United Nations system is not very good at listening to itself, let alone to listening to many of its own governments, and the governments themselves are not listening. So let's begin by making that change. You mentioned it, Stephen, very beautifully. It's not happening, let's do it. I'll do it, all right? You'll do it because it's not happening, that's okay. So let's take that step forward. Let's do the act of listening to the letter and to the emotion. Let's start there. That's what leadership, transformative leadership, is like.
Thank you, Azza. We'll turn straight away to Audrey, followed by Fabrizio.
Well, thank you so much. And of course, Azza brings up something very important, and that is our ability to listen and to really hear the underlying messages that are being expressed. And also, the United Nations has been, a forerunner in many ways about creating aspirational documents, as well as setting forth the indices of what it takes to have a leadership in the United Nations. And this really wonderful paper that you had mentioned, on the courage and integrity in UN leadership. And I really wanted to highlight some of the words in it. It says, in light of the multiplication of transnational dangers, many look to the United Nations for leadership and solutions. And I would say that that is very true. Because the manner in which it was created, had set forth these beautiful aspirational principles and, again, values that when we hear them, we hear the truth that these values represent. And we are seeking principled leadership based on the objectives and principles set forth in the United Nations Charter and in the international norms and agreements that reflect the highest aspirations of humankind. And we must always remember and never lose sight of those important values. Aspirational as they may be, they do set the guiding light that should also help us to light our pathway in many moments of darkness, to find that source again through which we can be together. And, the aspect of Dag Hammarskjöld as one of the premier persons who was so deep in his mentioning and promotion of, values. And he said that, what is indispensable is integrity underpinned by courage. And as we discuss all of the multiple ways in which our sorrows and our grievances and our difficulties are manifested in multitudes, we must always remember that undergirding it all is the return and the call to our values. And, the work of the United Nations is basically the expression of values in action. And Dag Hammarskjöld indicated 3 important core values that really underpin the work of the United Nations. And these are very important values. And he indicated first, loyalty to the principles of the UN Charter. And the principles set forth in the UN Charter are very important, and we should read it often and constantly, remember what these principles are. And he said, second, linked to it is the independence from any national or regional interests. And third, to have that integrity. So he stressed the importance of courage in order to be able to uphold these 3 core values. And there are, very important key civil servants who walk around with the UN Charter and the preamble, you know, on their clothes, in their handbags, you know, every day, because that document is so very meaningful. And it is an expression of moral courage, and the moral courage that we must have, that is, of course, informed by political insight and vision. So, you know, having clarity of vision, integrity, and political insight are essential for the kind of leadership that we are seeking, whether in our own national government, within the leadership of the United Nations. But, you know, we have to face controversy, and we have to weather unpopularity. We often face condemnation for making a stand in our moral courage. And oftentimes, you know, making that stand is within the fog of a great deal of uncertainty, you know, confusion, contradictory political pressures, which, you know, bear greatly upon how we are able to move into the world. But, you know, these are very important qualities of not only the leadership in the United Nations, but qualities that we must have as individual citizens in, you know, any country that we live in, even in the citizenship of the community we live in, and in the family life that we are living in, because each person is a leader of his or her own life. And we cannot escape the need to have as a foundation for living sound principles and values, and the development of one's inner character and spiritual life as we lead ourselves in our daily lives, and in whatever context that we may find ourselves you know, expressing ourselves in, whether within the UN community, whether within, you know, governments, or even within our own families.
Thank you, Audrey. That was fantastic. Without pause, I'll just turn straight to Fabrizio for his contribution on this question. You have the floor.
Well, I think Audrey said a lot of what I wanted to say around the sort of leadership required. I'd like to come back to where we are. I mean, you alluded to this, Dan, at the beginning. No, I don't think we're in a very good place. This year was the hottest year on record, 5 years after the Paris Agreement. We're not on track to meet the commitments governments made there. There was just an article I saw this morning in the BBC saying that, and this is the title of the BBC's article, Wildlife in Catastrophic Decline. And it points out that in the past 50 years, wildlife has declined by 2/3. So species that had survived for literally thousands or tens of thousands of years, in just 50 years, my generation, our generation, have managed to destroy by more than half. You know, there's a resurgence of global power politics. It's evident in the paralysis of the Security Council and its inability to deal with some of the bloodiest conflicts of our time. And there's a shifting of global power politics in a way that makes people feel much more insecure in many places. And I do think against that backdrop, we do need much more long-sighted leadership that does, you know, to quote what Roberto said in his first intervention, that, you know, takes its values from looking in the eyes of its kids and thinking about what they're going to say 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the line. And I suspect our decision making would be totally different if that perspective was consistently taken. So I think that long-sighted leadership, and then the attributes of moral courage that Audrey so eloquently shared. I think also we have to resist the temptation, and I'm probably not very good at that, of sort of looking at the big headlines as I outlined them and then feeling despair, because that can very quickly lead to cynicism or a sense of helplessness, or sort of shrugging one shoulder and say, well, I can't change climate change. I can't make the Security Council fix Syria. So, let me be passive. And I think there, the challenge that we all need to reflect upon is, what can we do in our respective areas of influence? As within our families, among our friends, within our communities. And that can be as simple as becoming a vegetarian, or using moderate language where everybody else is using polarizing discourse. And I think a lot of that is happening, especially among younger people. But that I do believe that change and overcoming some of the challenges that I mentioned will come from the bottom up, and will come from, and we see that already happening in some of the Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, some of these leaderless social movements that are swaying the world. So also looking at focusing on one's own area of influence, taking the long-term perspective. And I would add also, in times where the world is so polarized, and so much, as was said by Aza, is not listening. It's just rehearsing a script, speaking to one's own supporters, rallying the tribe against another tribe. I think the ability to build bridges and the ability to resist the temptation to join in and be part of that polarization is also deeply important.
Thank you so much, Fabrizio. And of course, we'll turn to Roberto. Please.
Yeah, I fully agree that we need a long-term vision to deal with many of these issues. However, we do live in the present, and that idea of localization and bringing it from the ground level, I think I can certainly support that, and I can affirm seeing that even in my own community. I come from a people who, in some of the history books, they wrote that we were extinct within 50 years, and we had to go and prove through DNA that we were related to those archaeological remnants that people find, and now they know that we're biologically connected to those folks, and this is the world that we live in. But what I'm saying is that if we, after being subject to such a brutal oppression, like other peoples, not the only ones, of course, and people still go through this, but if we can, survive this long a time and still have a message of hope, right? That we can still trust in the spirit. I think that's something that needs to be brought in, and I think that's why when Fabrizio mentioned earlier in his earlier intervention about the League of Nations, that there was 2 indigenous leaders who attempted to go to the League of Nations because they saw that what was happening to their people were not listening to them at that national level. So they felt that they had to take their message to the international level to get some kind of help, to get some kind of support for what they were going through, some kind of support for their people. So they understood this idea of coming together, the need for allies. And that was, in one case, it was Chief Descaje from the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois people, and another one was from the other side, was T.W. Ratana from the Maori people from Aotearoa, or what we know as New Zealand. So those 2 folks did not communicate beforehand. This was about in the 1920s. But they both had the same idea, so that spirit, that understanding was, really prevalent across, and that really shows that divine spark, as some people mentioned, across, the humanity, right? But, as we see now, and it was mentioned with the calls for racial justice in the United States and in other areas, what we see, the rising up of people against, this renewed oppression, or not that it never ended, but it seems that it's ramping up at the same time that people's minds are opening to other perspectives, right? To that spiritual perspective.
Now, May peace be with you and with us all. Let's dance it in, Summer.
Woo. Okay, everybody, if you want to stand up, find your way to, and I know there's some people that are transitioning to what's next. So just so you know, we're here for about 30 minutes doing some dancing together. And then the next event is happening in 30 minutes. So I'm going to put the music on.
The earth beneath me.
How's the sound?
The sky above.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Good.
This heart
Can
that's
you hear me?
beating.
Can you hear me?
Mother, won't you carry me, carry me, carry me home.
I want to welcome you into your body in a nice sway. Inviting your future self, your whole self. Feel your feet. Yes, let your arms become the rivers. Let your eyes follow the waters. Child will always be. Mother, carry me home. And let your hands explore the space around your body. Breathing deep.
This heart that's beating. Mother, won't you carry me, carry me.
Inviting the energy allies of your wholeness into the body. Welcome it in.
Sky that's parting.
Wherever it needs to
This
go.
heart that's singing. Mother, won't you carry me?
Let's go to the future together. Weaving in your future and settle in here in this present moment. Infinity future hands. Big exhale, grounding yourself here. Yeah, nice. It's flowing. Nice big inhales.
River is flowing inside of me.
And let your authentic weaving, what are you weaving into this world? Oh, what are the sounds that you're weaving into the collective? Around yourself. What are the fruits? Gathering the fruits. Gathering. And just let yourself arrive here. Arriving butter onto the body. Presence. More and more of you. Let that feel the earth. Thank you for dancing with me.
This heart that's beating. Mother, won't you carry me, carry me,
Carrying, rocking.
The sky that's parting.
Rocking
This
yourself.
heart that's singing. Mother, won't you carry me?
What is coming in from the future? Is it joy? Feel it. Feel it. peace on earth in your body, in your heart. Ah. In your hands. Oh yeah. Oh. We are painting this world together, connecting to each other. Jai Shakti Ma. Bring your weaving, weaving your threads in. Jai Shakti Ma. I see you, Nina. I see you, Heather. Ha ha. We're weaving together. Infinity hands. In the water, yeah. Diving into the water. Cosmic waters. Dive in. Oh, water. Splash that water. Oh. Inner dolphins splashing in those cosmic future waters. Ocean flowing inside me. Woo! Flowing inside me. Yeah. Just take a moment between songs and listen in. What's happening? What's arriving in you in this moment? Listen in deeper and deeper.
I'm on my way down to the river. I'm on my way down to the snow.
Yeah, way down, way down. Get deep in you.
I feel the cold of the fire.
Yes.
'Cause it's my time
To be born. New you, right here. Step into the newness of this moment.
You gotta move
Cha cha cha. Cha cha
when your
cha.
soul stable.
Cha cha cha.
You gotta move.
Woo, it's getting hot in here. Now let your fingers cha cha cha. Cha
When your
cha cha.
arms say fly,
Fly, yeah. Those phoenix
you gotta fly.
transmuting.
When your arms say fly,
Whole body. What are you gonna do?
when a spirit catch you.
Oh, sometimes.
When a spirit catch you.
What happens?
When a spirit catch you.
Oh, you're gonna fly into the future. Ha, yes.
You gotta
Now
walk
shoulders. I want to see the cha cha cha.
when your feet say.
Cha cha cha. Ha, yeah.
You gotta walk
Walk like you mean it
when your feet say.
in this world. What do you stand for in
You
your
gotta
hips?
dance when your hips say.
What does
dance.
this new world need from you?
You gotta dance when your hips say dance.
So sometimes the spirit catches you.
And when a spirit catches you, when a spirit catches you,
Oh,
spirit catches you.
oh, where are we gonna go? We're gonna go deeper into ourselves.
Oh, now
We're gonna reflect a little bit.
you fall
Oh.
down.
And then we're gonna get back up. Whoa. Oh, down. Oh. Up and down we go.
Oh, now
Nice. Bold.
you gotta clap.
Sometimes they just say clap.
You gotta clap. When your hands say,
Any rhythm. What's your rhythm of claps?
you gotta go.
Oh, what is the rhythm of your heart?
Say go. You gotta go.
You know what's
When
coming.
your heart say go.
Oh,
And when the spirit catches you,
oh,
when the spirit catches you, spirit catches you,
oh.
fall down.
Let your heart feel the smile line in your heart. Oh, yeah. Oh, oh.
I'm going down.
Floating heart around the space. Any direction. Feel the back of your heart
I'm going
floating.
to the snow.
Oh, let her fly. Let her wings expand.
Fire.
That transmuting, that forgiveness.
My time to be born.
Cha-cha-cha. Body cha-cha. Cha-cha-cha. What is it time to shake up? Nice. How are you feeling? Share in the chat. How are you feeling? What are you feeling from your future self? Tell us in the chat. What is she or he or what is this part of you sharing? What is the medicine in this dance?
We can only be good.
Liberation. Loving it, Summer. Okay, the session with Phil starts in 15 minutes. Meanwhile, we're gonna dance.
The most important thing for everyone in the world is our very own inside.
Let yourself float.
Our soul, our ability to love.
Yeah.
If it is
Connection, honor, embodied. So cool. Very cool, Tammy. So I want you to turn up the volume on whatever that is.
is in order.
Turn up the volume in relationship with your future self. We're going to become the frequency of peace, like a pendulum in your spine. Yeah? Feel the bottom of the pendulum.
I'm no longer trying to be right.
In
I
your
choose to
pelvis. And relax. All that sitting we've been doing all week. Time to move that part of your body. How does it want to be moved? Oh. Hey. Nice. Show me your hands, the waves. Yeah. And just rock into it. Rock your fabulous self. Rock it. You don't need to know what's next. Just be here. The future is already here, as Sheila says. And where in your body is a little, shut off, I want you to bring the rocking into that part of the body. I feel a desire to rock my right knee. Maybe it's a different place for you.
I'm no longer trying to be right. I choose
I'm gonna slice through what no longer serves. And whoa. Feel that inner pendulum Whoa, 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 whoa. Sounds of release. Ah, ah, ah. So good. Positive tension. Ah, ah, and release. What is a rocking surrender for you? How can your breath support your transmuting, your forgiveness, your release? Nice. And we're gonna drop down and whoa, 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 whoa. Fluffing up the energy. Fluff it up.
I no longer try to be right. I choose to be happy.
I just choose to be happy. Why not? Ha ha. Ha. How about a little laughter? The laughter dance. Woo! And oh. I want to see you laugh. I want to see you laugh, Dana. I want to see you laugh, Dara. Let's see it. Let's see it. Ha ha ha. Woo! I know, Dara, you made a lot of people laugh in the Garden of Joy Feel room. I saw that. Yes. Oh, yeah. Feel the interdependence in this space. I know you're in a physical space, but feel your connection, the web of life through each other in your rocking. See how that informs your dance as you feel in to the relationship with all life. The beautiful gift you simply are being here. Time. Oh, I'm so glad I have a little bit more time. All right. I'm clapping for all of you. Woo! We did it. We did up convergence. We did it. Woo! Yeah, Nina. Yes. I want to see your "we did it" dance. We did it. Oh yeah. Woo! Woo! We did it. Some people said it wasn't possible, but we did it. Feel that celebration in your toes all the way up. Yeah. Oh, it's so exciting. How about we did it rumble? This is a rumble. Oh, we did it! Woo! Hey, hey. Feel the next layers of possibilities right there. Grab a hold of those bubbles. The possibilities of what's next. Feel the bubbles of possibilities under your heels. Oh, it's so good. Yes. Waving at each other. Woo! Show me your heart in your face and your hands. Oh, it's so beautiful. I want to take a picture. going to be dancing all day. Show me you did it in your hips. Woo! Now, how about imagine we co-created peace on earth. Now feel that we did it. Woo! Yes! Oh! What is yes like? In your spine, feel the yes, we did it. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Since time is so interesting, still we're working in the confines of time, and yet this is an infinite dance. Infinite. Feel the infinite space for your dance right now. Feel the service and sovereignty right here. Imagine flower petals extending out from your glorious sacred body. Every time, oh, at the end of the petals, Shanti, meaning peace, yeah? Feel your petals. Feel them. Shanti. What color are your petals? Use your playful imagination. Shanti. Petals all directions. Om Shanti. Yeah. Weaving the elements through your petals. Yeah. Feel the light of the future shining onto your petals. Yes. And make it emotional, it's okay. Embrace whatever is here. Now imagine we're in a garden of all of our flowers together. Oh, we've become a garden of joy. Feel how your petals sometimes weave with your neighbor's petals. Oh, blessing all the flowers on this earth, every single life. "24, 360 degrees of Shanti, all directions. Shanti. And back. Oh, Shanti. Maybe there's a particular place on earth you want to send peace, send it there. I'm sending it to all of you that are in this room dancing with me. Peace be with you. May clarity in your life. And those that are live with us, I feel you, I see you too. Feel that your body is a big Shanti. You are the peace on earth. Yes. In your heart. Oh, I am the peace on earth. Shake out any tension. Oh. are the light. You are the light. You are peace on earth. Now in 2030, all of it, all that you need, all that you be in relationship with all life. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, just breathing that in, grounding this experience into your body, and just feeling that grounding, that incredible energy that is your life force energy, your birthright to feel good. Thank you so much, Sheila and Heather and John. I pass the torch. And those of you that are in the room, please share your comments. I want to know what's happening inside you. We all do. Blessings.
Got a few more minutes, love. It's fabulous. You guys have done such a beautiful job.
I'm checking the comments here on the side. Thank you
I'm
so
gonna
much.
add Sheila. I'm gonna add Heather.
Good. Yes, please.
Very beautiful, my gosh.
That was absolutely profound. Thank you so much, Sheila and Heather, for the weaving. And thank you for, in some ways, I felt like I cut you off, Heather. I'm sorry, but I was looking at time and it was absolutely.
Today's all about timelessness, so I needed that. That check. It's perfect.
Thank you for trusting. And thank you all of your team and joined us. Love you too.
Yeah, there's an amazing 3 days unfolding here. You guys have grounded us. And we now have a platform to build upon. And Brother Phil is here. He's going to be joining you now. But just thank you so much. It is so important for us to get off to a good start. And I can't imagine a better way.
Yes.
Peace now, everyone.
Come true to dance with all of you. I can't even tell you. That's my favorite way to be with others.
So everyone's welcome to stay here. I'm going to bring Phil. And so this is the opening ceremonies of the union of the condor, the quetzal, and the eagle, and the idea of this digital justice and healing commission. So it's a step up beyond the experience we've just had, but something that's profound and that's going to ground us as we attune into the present, but harvest the past and build a new future. So I'm going to
are the foundation of the future. Action is crucial. I are the rock. I are the solution. Day by day you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Judge me not by what I seem to be. Judge me by what I say and I do. Give what you got and you get what you give. Keep it consistent, keep it positive. I are the foundation of the future. Action is crucial. Are the rock. I are the solution.
Peace is love, peace is unity, peace is respect, peace is you and me, we only want peace.
Do not tell me about those gunshot and bomb blasts, the roaring sound of tanks that fail to think before launching a bang that causes more harm. They said the best way to start a conflict is for God to create a man with an empty stomach beside a man with a protruding belly. The touch of the wind on my skin makes me question my own existence, thus ending up asking myself this question. Do dead people feel the touch of the wind or the whispers of peace? After all, I am but a messenger of peace. The whispers that stops you from being violent when you abuse for your skin, religion, or language. That is peace. Why the aggression? It's time for confession. How many souls have you led into the ocean of depression that often wash them away from the shores of peace? For peace should be our possession, no more question. Peace will be the motto of my generation. Peace is attainable, definable. Peace exists in you and me. Peace is not a buffalo that escapes into the thin air or a tear from a widow eye that can't be held onto. Peace is here with us. I can feel his presence. Do you know why peace is running far away from our chaos? Because we ourselves have helped in diminishing and extinguishing its light. Peace is here, not there. When you board a plane, you don't inquire about the religion or the skin color of the pilot, for your aim is to land in peace, not pieces. What will you lose from loving another human or letting him wander on your streets? After all, the same red blood flows through your veins. Don't worry about the uniqueness in our skins. Just like the rainbow, we beautify the world with colors. For the prayers in Mecca and Jerusalem is peace. For white, black people is peace. Raise your hand if you are peace.
We don't have to do it all alone. Even if it feels that way with the hand we've been dealt, even if the odds have been stacked against us our entire lives, we don't have to do it all alone. But it feels that way sometimes. Was it meant to be like this? How much of the road has been rigged? How much of it has been paved by the color of my skin, the keys between my thighs, the slant of my eyes? It's no surprise when a hand is raised at me, but for you, the courts must be called. It was Karen. 6 o'clock news, violence spews, hashtag BLM, milk tea alliance, water is life, me too, but everyone still loses in the end. We dance a different dance. Our bodies know a rhythm of resilience, of what it means to be between a rock and a hard place and still bloom like a dandelion through concrete. Sometimes we take a step back while patting your spine, swallowing our words, swallowing our worth just to move forward. Most times we got little choice. When we look up, We only see the same faces, the same people who feed themselves the cake, and by the time it gets to us, it's just crumbs. And you wonder why we've been hungry for so long. You wonder why we're out here in the streets, setting up camp, blocking bridges, sharing strategies from coast to coast, sending letters to our parents that we might not come home, in the hopes that we will be free, that we will all be free. I was once told that privilege was like having big feet. We all have them, feet, that is. Different sizes and shapes and grooves under the toes, meeting the earth heavy with the weight that we each carry, heavy with the weight of all we don't know. Bigger ones tend to leave marks on the timeline like scars within the rings of an ancient tree. We know the life of one person changes everything, and we know that the death of one person can change everything too. Truth is, it's still all love. I mean, we can't help how we fell into this world. No one asked for this. No one blames you for having big feet. But if you do, just one request. Watch where you step. Pay attention, because it all matters. Each movement matters. Each moment matters. The past is not just the past. The future is now. A butterfly flaps its wings and causes a tornado. A party sparks a fire scorching tens of thousands of acres and counting. A breath is taken for the last time and exhales a revolution. We were built into this world alone and together. So ask yourself, what is it that you want to leave behind?
This piece goes out to anyone who has a vision of what this world should look like and is working towards that goal. Aim high. Aim high, shoot far, aim for the moon. If you miss, you'll hit a star. Aim high, shoot far, just aim for the moon. If you miss, you'll hit a star. And it's easier to want things than to get them. Most people have dreams, but they never manifest them. Pressure makes diamonds. You have to mind if you want to come out shining. And dreams mean nothing if they leave when eyelids flutter open. See, empires were built from just wishing and hoping. See, doors will always open. Opportunities may pass, ships may sail, but you have control of the mast. And this is your sea. This is your sky. It's your destiny. Let no one break your concentration. They got that tunnel vision. Let them stay in the mental train stations, cause success is a journey, it's not a destination. You need to have that patience, that drive to make your passions come alive, and you alone can decide how far you will go. And God gave you his divine ability. Believe in speaking into being. See before actually seeing. Give your life meaning as you attain what you envision. Keep on dreaming, don't ever let it die. Don't be the eagle that never knew he could fly.
The people are counting on you. 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 Win! Win! All right. Win! Now let's go. In the middle of Babylon, what's going on? Hold it down with the upper down. Listen to the sounds from the clouds to the ground. When you heard, tap into the universe. It's a gift, not a curse. It could always be worse. Put your mask on first. Win! 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 And breathe. Say to yourself, what I do right now is unto me. Every breath
food for peace. In this poem, we meet a war general, a crooked politician, a drug lord and a supremacist, an unexpected arrival to a place far-fetched from their realities. As little as we reflect on the casualties we cause to this world on this day, we meet at a place I've never met before, at a place I've never seen before, Peace Town, a dining place on the side of Route Anarchy 5. Welcome to Peace Town, home to new peacemakers. Can I take your order? Dazzled and disdained at the sight of peacemakers, the quad forwards back to their call. Wait, take a look at the menu at least before you go. They think, how dare this pacifist question their judgment to bypass any establishment that puts peace as a forefront of their existence? Questions pose more questions as the greeter places 4 menus in front of them. Captioned, making the world a better place since there is no year. They look on. Today's special everlasting peace. Empathy boiled into the hearts of those seeking sustainable revolution for all living beings with a compassion to reflect on individual contributions to which created an imbalanced world, served with a side of courage. Before they can think, they capture another piecemeal, the anti-oppressive soup, a savory stew of love for human compassion, respect, and decency to nurture a world that rejects any idioms and practices related to the disruptive judgment of one's race, economic status, ethnic group, sex, gender identity, sexuality, culture, geography, level of education, choice of religion, and the status of physical, mental, and emotional health, served with a side of leadership. And just one more, the Just Say No economic platter. An assortment of aspirational ideologies to eliminate a world that operates from the strength of created economical weaknesses with the vision of internalizing healthy globalization, serving size for 6. End world hunger with sustainable and cooperative economics, and climate change through the elimination of supply chains rooted in anti-earth practices, and drug epidemics with the dismantlement of the global drug economy, and human trafficking with the creation of a unified force dedicated to eradicating prime hubspots and locational markets, and poverty and homelessness with a devout plan to redistribute wealth, resource, and literacy to those in need, and end colonization with the release of the colonized from the colonizer, along with any reparative tools and opportunities for domestic restoration. Everyone raises their eyes to the greeter. One can see the pain in each of their sockets, 2 fighting back tears, one screaming and antagonizing pain, and another so silent to Earth's ears. Pause. I'm afraid you've missed one more. It's everyone's favorite when they visit Peace Town. They look over, turn their menus, and read aloud in one breath. The bento box of forgiveness. A 4-piece bento box with pickled hope, fresh willingness to impact internal and external change, rolled up passion, and a side of introspection for self-reflection and acceptance, drizzled with the forgiveness of personal impact for contributing to a divisive world regardless of action or reaction, served with a side of experiential wisdom. The silence between them is heavier than the weight of an unjust world. We accept commitment and dedication as our form of payment here at Peace Town. We only have 2 policies: consume peace with grace and hard work, and take a left on Route Anarchy 5 onto Justice of All Kinds Interstate. There you will meet other peacemakers to share foods for thought for creating a more peaceful world. Each of the individuals returned to the car full of many delicacies for peace and change, drifting onto the interstates away from the beautiful sunset that burst on Anarchy 5. From the road more traveled by to the road more needed by, they turn, and it is the politician who notices the new caption on his receipt. Welcome to Peace Town, making the world a better place since today.
Survival is not a fingerprint. It is not the blueprint or the river you come to in the mornings. It is not your home or a place to get rooted or how you pray. It is sometimes access, sometimes repetitive functioning, sometimes the easier land to swim to. I've known of survival as my default. I know when I would lie to the breath in its unwillingness to last. I gave myself awards for outwitting endurance, thought suffering was a part of the trophy of finding land, thought it was too selfish to dispossess the rubble or choose the sweetened, more finished road, thought it was a sin to lean on the tree's extension of life, the fruit beckoning into the world, thought if I ate, I needed to build my own tree from the brown of my own hands, from the root of my own back, and if I stretched out all of me for everything, then I could, like elastic, become a bigger version of myself, a worthier story my body could live from. But the truth is that all trees are planted by someone, and if not someone, then waves of a deteriorating fruit, and if not the waves, then an animal, and if not an animal, then always the creator of that animal. And isn't that the original sign that it is okay to need? To need is not a sin. To name your need is not a blasphemy, but instead how you hold your humanity, your livelihood. So what does it mean to build a world that's existential question is not survival, but purpose? Wouldn't that mean that I need you, like the fruit needed the person, or the wind, or the animal? Wouldn't that mean that love is a human right? That radical love is the foundational truth of our existence? Wouldn't that mean that I can't run away from my running away? Wouldn't that mean that my hands begin when they surrender, when they fall facing up, fasting from the need to move, and say, take this cup, I trust you'll make it run over.
Things I could never tell the sea. It's hard to wash away sins from the waters our ancestors tried to walk on, taught me that I could only stay alive if I keep my head up when being submerged in you. Waiting, because this Sarah Batman body drags me underwater when I do nothing. But Yamaha would never allow the sea to swallow our kind whole again. Her name, which means mother whose children are the fish, you knew big fish couldn't live in tiny ponds. You watched me stifle. Knew water had oxygen in it. Knew underwater is where blacks learn to breathe. To know water means struggle. To be twins. Both bodies of water. Why my sweat and tears are salted. Never question why the sea is so salty. Didn't you know this black is cleansed? I don't get seasick when the sea cradles me to sleep. On the spines of men no book seems to bind or account for. Funny how the water always brings things back to us. You are the body that holds all of my troubles. Better than my mother could. My mother's mother's mother held you like if it was a rite of passage. And once my mother told me to never turn my back against the sea. In front of me is current and it's only the waves that would get me there. But how can you turn your back against the thing that brought you here? So here I am. My mother's 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 reincarnation. I can imagine living in a space that has less room than the dead. Seems to be a little bit selfish. I can imagine the captain confusing his spirit of his men with the spirit in his cup. Both deadly. His cockpit a bridge. To know death better than bondage. To be free. To be twins. To know these bodies belong to nobody. So we will have a funerary baptism. An open casket for the fishes. A body as a bloody host for a shark's communion. Encapsulating dense bones of my ancestors in Davy Jones's locker. I was a middle passage between dirt and a foreign land, between land and a foreign land. The water between continents became a second home to me. I am an immigrant, permanent like a riptide. We teach our children to use water as leisure, but teach them to wash away pain in the solvent that got us out of it. And that's why I learned to wade first. Just as the ocean gave birth to Black people and delivered us to a new land, some seek salvation here. But for the rest of us, finding escape was enough.
Happy International Peace Day, everyone. My name is Gabriel Ramirez, and when I think about what it looks like to shape peace together, it takes the effort of individuals and the communities that they are a part of to make that kind of peace possible. And with that, here is my poem, The Blooming. I am tired of yelling, of losing my voice to prove a point, to be heard. Born, male, Black, Dominican, I've been taught to take up space, but no one ever told me that I could be a garden, could be soft and smell good and bloom at volumes people usually walk past. Usually lavender, mango cocoa, and pink sugar oils are how people remember me. How the air became an antidote, became the search for the scent that filled their lungs with flowers, with what reminds them they too can be a home for breathing and blossoming joy. And the heart hugs that follow, they require us to hug with the left sides of our bodies so that our hearts face each other while we all take a deep breath in and exhale together. Exhaling everything that tried keeping us from being here. And this hug, this holy place that has no heaven except for the other person, for this intimacy is in no need of romance, in no need of a false future promised to one another, but the promise of this hug ending when we are both ready to release each other back into the world, back to sidewalks brimming with a ghost, and the promise of some danger. Some gardens are unlike anything you've ever seen, but you never ask what had to die for you to be this captivated. To be a garden is to take up space, hoping others will call you home. Call on rainy days too. Days when clouds are all so you forget to look west, forget to think light for its time, bright and generous, now retreating into invisibility instead of staying where they feel unloved. Where I will return. To be unloved is to have been loved incorrectly, loved enough to believe the lie of love being all I need. All of the failed gods in my stomach are dead and screaming for tenderness, screaming like my father. A garden ended at the root, at his bipolar, his depression, his alone. And I blame his absence for not letting me show him how to water himself into what heals. What kind of son am I to think what is my father's isn't mine, isn't genetic? I carry his loneliness that isn't loneliness, but the choice to ignore the world. Thank you so much.
मस्त 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 दम मस्त कलंदर मस्त मस्त दम मस्त कलंदर मस्त दम मस्त कलंदर मस्त मस्त दम मस्त कलंदर मस्त कुरुदे दम दम वली अली कुरुदे दम दम वली अली सखीलाल कलंदर मस्त मस्त सखीलाल कलंदर मस्त मस्त झूलेलाल कलंदर मस्त मस्त दम मस्त कलंदर मस्त मस्त दम मस्त कलंदर मस्त दम मस्त कलंदर मस्त मस्त दम मस्त कलंदर मस्त
The music's got me drunk and I haven't had a drop. It must be the London that's got in this pot. Intoxicated rhythms that seduce this lock. The key's been turned and my heart's in shock. This ticker's got a clock, so take the hands off the clock. This blood is getting hot on my chest, is it not? Pop, pop. No, you can't be stopped. My eyes have been open and I'm ready to watch these crimson robes that carry stories of old, echoing the tale of Ali across the fold. Words that can carry us shelter from the cold, meant for the lips of the meek and bold. Let the truth be told by 1,000 ruby tongues. Blessed is the breath of the old and young. Only your grace knows the treasure of these lungs. You bring the light, now the darkness is done. May your spirit be drunk, may your spirit be light. May you find all the grace that's offered in this life. May your spirit be filled, may your spirit be free. May you be blessed by the love of Ali. May your spirit be drunk, may your spirit be light. May you find all the grace that's offered in this life. May your spirit be filled, may your spirit be free. May you be blessed by the love of Ali.
Peace, peace. Assalamu alaikum. This is called The Message. Make a fable of these hands. When everything becomes transition, when everything has somewhere else to be, give me your blood. Not all of it, just a drip. Just enough to speak into the sky all the things we ever wanted to say. Never had the courage to say it. Sometime soon, we will ask the showers of sunlight for a second chance, for a legend which ends in a beginning. The beast saved by the bell cracked but still sane. When every mistake is seen chasing your body down cobblestone roads, make a dance of this bullfight. A matador at your mat or door, pleading for atonement, for escape, midnight bleeding from his cape. And And yet, you are the furthest away when you are right here. And yet, the closer you are, the louder the quiet. There are pigeons straddling the streets, searching for glory dusted and faded. They were supposed to be doves, born to carry paper prayers on the flight of their feet. And so we run, because we are running out of time all of the time. And as long as it takes to shake these sins out of our system, to put the serpents back in repent, we march softly towards a message which proves its reputation for alchemy. Swimming through the cold to finally feel warm through Rubik's cubes made of sandcastles, through bodies forgotten by the ambers. You think maybe there was promise in the past, but maybe it's not what we prayed for. Forever forward, a charcoal salmon, staccato scales reminiscing of the sea. When the cartographer of your heart places rivers where your eyes used to be, I gaze at the lines of your hands. I read it and weep. A summary of all the things we chose to let go. So walk slow. We are all carrying the best parts of ourselves, searching for one another, but perhaps the same thing you are searching for is already marching softly towards you. Don't wait. Never wait. Don't wait for peace to come. Wait. Wait. Never wait for peace to come. Peace.
What they didn't write in the newspaper, what they didn't show in the media, was that you were neither lost nor savage, that you stood for your people, that you had a message grander than any sky, gathered the shadow of your ancestors, scribbled all you had left across your tongue, and told them that there's no more space in the waiting room of a man's chest that bleeds freedom, that speaks nobility, that is the hired gun of hope, with the homeland bleeding in its streets, with the youth of a people who have spoken freedom in mother tongue. Concrete streets knowing more than enough feet stomping today. Deadline has a new meaning. What they didn't tell you is how to answer your children when they ask you why they are born with a pre-placed target across their back, to be taken out by the ones who are there to serve and protect. When the administration questions why streets are full with new and embedded faith, taking what belongs to them, wanting freedom and justice of who they are, what was written for you. That is when you know something is wrong. When you've tried to hold the soul in of a man from the bullet holes of injustice, then you know what's like to see a light flash before your eyes. In reality, we have become a people that have known oppression like the backs of our hands. Our eyes overwhelmed. We spend our days watching the salvation being ripped from its core of a people that have wanted livelihood in handfuls. We hear your cries for justice, the wars in your bellies, the hunger in your hearts to be answered by a rise in your youth, a thunder in your belief, a hope in your history. We sit in rooms that carry none of our lineage. We teach from textbooks that rearrange our history, color-coded kaleidoscopes of youth. What they didn't say is that you have a history written in tears, a roaring heart of faith, a warrior's message, an infamous ocean of ears, a cargo ship of will, an embodiment of land and soul, the stories that should be told. What they didn't write in the newspaper, what they didn't show in the media, is that we sit a sea away from what real revolutions look like, and we've borne our battle gracefully. So now it's our time. And our tomorrow looks brighter because you had a place in creating it.
Aiden doesn't talk politics on vacation. Things were different for Aiden. So when Amnesty International explained their human rights work in Venezuela, he leaned in, whispered, "Listen, I know this is important, but I don't want to talk politics on vacation." Even though we were only in Brussels because we'd signed up to study world government, but because things were different. He couldn't tell how my skin grew too hot to hold, how I blamed the spicy mayo on Belgian fries and didn't reach for the Tabasco for 5 dinners straight, and because things were different. I didn't show him the boiling of my skin. I just bit my lip, unhinged my retainer and my second tongue, and doused them in Clorox, and because things were different, I didn't whisper back. I didn't ask Aiden about his hungry relatives, and I didn't tell him about my uncle wandering empty supermarket aisles in Caracas. I just picked on my calluses. And as Amnesty International wrapped up their presentation, I left on the table a Granny Smith peel of me.
Oh, we call for peace. Peace. Earth, hallelujah. Peace for the natural world. And peace for our place in the natural world. We've got the natural world inside of us, am I right? We're made of the earth. Earth, hallelujah. Human justice. Earth justice. One and the same thing. Earth justice, human justice, same thing. Earth justice, human justice, same thing. Earth justice, Earth, hallelujah. 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 Take your stand. Take your stand. The child is wild in order to the man. Take your stand. Take your stand. Earth must be on to take your stand. Take your stand. Take your stand. The child is wild in order to the man. Take your stand. Take your stand. Put it down now. This caverns underground. Highest jet stream in the sun. Follow the young. Hey, follow the young. This is it. Earth riot, climate riot. Here you come. Here you come. This is it. Earth riot, climate riot. Here you come. Here you come. This is it. Earth riot, climate riot. Here you come.
Hi, my name is Nathaniel Valdivieso, and I don't know how to write a peaceful poem. Forgot how to breathe slow, the world gets loud, and I'm scared of forgetting. Yesterday I blinked and I missed another genocide. I forgot how to stop with my eyes open. I go outside and see a battlefield. The concrete's burning. These days it's like I'm waiting to flinch at the news. These days it's text me when you get home. Write a number down on your arm so they can't take it from you. Bring eye drops for the tear gas and pack light in case you need to run. Please, I just care about you. Get home safe. I blinked and almost forgot my generation was scared to go to school last year. Bulletproof backpacks sold at like crayons last September, and at 3, some kids ride home in body bags. I hear gunshots, and I text my friends. I hear fireworks, and I text my friends. I hear a motorcycle misfire and duck not too loud, or I'm called a snowflake. I hold my breath, and I'm reminded that some can't breathe, go missing in the night at their doorstep while jogging, living. I don't know how to write a peaceful poem yet. I tried. Show me.
Back in 2011, scientists found 17 pyramids and over 3,000 Egyptian settlements that were previously unknown to us, buried hundreds of feet below the surface. The infrared camera they used to find these settlements was in space, 400 miles above Earth. That's what this poem is based on. Man was born out of Eve's womb, and she is a descendant of clay. Or is it Lilith? Or is it Adam's ribcage? She just may be a great-grandchild of fish? The sun revolved around us until the solar system showed that we were one of 8 planets that toured the famous star. No offense, Pluto, and no offense, Snuffleupagus planet Nibiru. Earth turned out to be as flat as a sphere. Columbus discovered an old continent with human inhabitants who centuries before crossed over an icy barren strait. That's if they are not the lost tribes of Israel. The Aztecs and Africans built the pyramids after ancient aliens had designed them. It's all a mirage of confusion. We've hardly scratched the surface of the human genome. So where does our arrogance get off assuming we see the whole picture when so many pieces of the puzzle are hidden and fresh to our comprehension? It took us a 400-mile step back to see 17 pyramids and over 3,000 settlements previously unknown buried under Egyptian sand. We are still finding ourselves. Who knows about all that is in the Vatican vaults, or what is on the dark side of the moon, or why Greece won't allow scientists to study their coast, where we found pottery, tools, and weapons that fit into no era or culture as our knowledge of history has documented. Or how informative it would be to excavate a pyramid in Illinois, or when we all individually come to that moment, that proverbial instance of the all-knowing, with all questions ever to be answered. Or must it make transcendentist existence to do so? We still have so much that we do not know. So whether it was the weather of the great rains, or the big boom with tides, or volcanic ash, or frozen ice meteors that gave our planet water, one conspiracy is no theory. It is a fact. A content arrogance stalemates growth and intelligence. We still have so much more to find. More aware. The next time I stop digging deeper, I'll have 17 pyramids and over 3,000 settlement reasons to keep exploring myself. Conveniently, searching out your inner self doesn't require a 400-mile step back. Only one immeasurable move. You still have so much more of yourself to see and unshovel.
You see, they
wanted us to tiptoe through the tulips. We said, no, we gonna footwork and move hips. See, our tiptoes be too swift, we two-step, then move quick. See, we be foundation. Like concrete in an open lot, y'all dance was built off of what we brought, and we brought that realness, that grit, that grind. You call it urban, we say color can't be defined. Honey, we are melanin skin. We turn bland into current trend with a pop block and a head spin. See, we know what it means to stand in the sunlight even though they be throwing shade. We have bled from red hearts and still came out like black spades, winning no matter the hand. Because in every hand, spades always trump. Put our feelings and emotions in protest, in crump, fist bump. Like Africa Bombada, we started breaking rules. Used hip-hop as our tool. Shout out to DJ Kool Herc for putting in work. Can I get a whoop whoop for the old school? We salute Sam, y'all, but that's boogaloo. You see, we roll Soul Train because our souls were in pain. But we do not vogue in vain. From our black, we whack. From New York to Camelback, racism never ran this train off track, and we still kept it classy. Like Catherine Dunham. Modern dance never seen us coming. And we realized then that they may not like the color of our skin, but that our music and our movement is in every sector you're in. So when we step in the cypher, we don't hesitate. We dance away the anger so we don't harbor hate. And we learn through dance how to collaborate. And if we all did the same, y'all, we could make America great.
La 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 la
Somos tierra, somos agua, somos aire, somos fuego.
Hoy, nuestra Madre Tierra respira y nos da una gran lección. Nos muestra que ella, como ser vivo e inteligente, es creadora de su propio hábitat, con la capacidad de recrearse a sí misma y reinventar su entorno, con o sin ayuda de la presencia humana. Nos enseña que la felicidad no llega cuando tenemos lo que deseamos, sino cuando disfrutamos de lo que tenemos. Porque la tierra no es de nosotros. Nosotros somos de la tierra. Un renacimiento que amorosamente nos invita a florecer por dentro y así obtener la claridad y la fortaleza para evolucionar en una nueva oportunidad de vivir en ella. Sin embargo, nuestros siguientes pasos deberán ser dados respetando, honrando, cuidando y amando a nuestra madre naturaleza, quien con su sabiduría y bondad nos provee de todo lo necesario para vivir en equilibrio. equilibrio. No olvidemos que la verdadera medicina está en la naturaleza y que el poder más grande para sanar es el amor. Mostremos a nuestros niños que el equilibrio es el principio supremo de todo y la cosecha futura dependerá de lo que sembremos hoy en ellos. Es tiempo de preguntarnos, ¿cuáles son las huellas que dejan mis acciones hoy? Seamos parte de este movimiento de conciencia, de amor hacia nuestro planeta, a la humanidad, a la vida. Recordemos que no somos seres humanos viviendo una experiencia espiritual. Somos espíritu viviendo una experiencia humana. Así que hoy ríe, canta, danza, juega, sueña, perdona, ama cada segundo de cada momento que vivas, silenciando nuestro ego. El poder se elevará. Es tiempo de despertar.
Let us begin by calling forth the ancestors. Now that the warriors, chiefs, and matriarchs of times past are here at last, let us pause and acknowledge their presence. Wopilatanka. We are one. We are one. We are one. Metakyo Ayasi. We are all related. Related. We are all related. Not just me and you, brothers and sisters, but all of us, the rocks and the rivers, everything that flies above, everything that crawls below, related, in relation, my relative. Do you ever just pause? Stop scrolling, stop scrolling, stop scrolling. Whatever you're searching for, it's not out there in the nothingness. There's beauty and expansion, creativity and wonderment inside ourselves, inside of you. Put your phone down, sit with your breath and go in, go deep. There's an entire universe in there. Can't you feel it resting in your stomach? Can't you feel it bursting from your chest? That heart is your power source. That beat is your own natural rhythm. You are perfectly on time. You are perfectly in time with the universe. Feel that power, that presence, that's you. Clear your mind. Breathe your spirit into your body. Follow your heart. It will lead you. And now, if you will allow, I'm asking to lead you. If you are comfortable, please close your eyes. Yes, really, right now, close your eyes. Listen to the sound of my voice, and as you do, hear the voices of all those who have come before me. And breathe. Breathe in the air of revolutionary love. Breathe out the stress and suffering. Breathe in, imagining a source of compassion. Breathe out the grief and violence. Breathe in, healing, light. Breathe out, trapped emotions. Breathe in, pride, reckoning, and survival. Breathe out all the pain and shame. Breathe in, forgiveness. Breathe out, inadequacy. Breathe in your fight for lives and life. Breathe out your fear and pain. Breathe in our healthy future. Breathe out our wounded past. Imagine your ancestors surrounding you now. Imagine your own compassion surrounds you. Now let us take a breath together for a change. Breathe in. Breathe out. And as we continue breathing from where we are, sense our breaths together for a change. Let us feel and see no stranger, now or ever. Repeat after me in your own mind. May I find peace. May I know peace. May I create peace. If you haven't yet, please open your eyes. May we remember we are good. May we know we are strong. May we feel we are loved. We are love. I am love. I am love. Peace.
We're strong, potent and solid. We're mighty, yet shaken. We tremble, shudder, shiver. We are river of calm, cool and collected, quiet, still and smooth. Smooth is the mood of love through mood ring eyes. We try, for we are challenged, taxed, tested, arrested. Intensify, a people in defense of thy humanness, seriously and not so serious. Delirious child, turbulently mild, mildly wild. We are love, we are seething, gullible children believing, understanding and demanding, yet easy, oh so breezy, protective, corrective. We are love.